Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's the start of the municipal year, and so therefore the first item on the agenda is the election of our chairman for the forthcoming municipal year. Can I have nominations, please, for the position of chair of the Standards Committee, please?
Can I re-elect chair?
Okay. Are there any other nominations for that? No. Okay. So therefore, can I just ask you, just for formality, if you could just vote on that, please? Thank you. Excellent. So, yet again, Trevor, you have the honour of being the chairman of our Standards Committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rob. So we'll move on to item number 2 on today's agenda, appointment of vice chair. If I could have nominations for that, please.
Same again, re-elect, please.
Second, yeah.
So Richard Stowe, formally voted into position.
Okay, lovely. Thank you.
Unanimous.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Apologies for absence.
Yes, we've had apologies from Councillor Sheila Woodhouse.
Thank you. And item number 4, declarations of interest.
As and when, Chair.
As and when. Thank you. Moving on to item 5, minutes of the previous meeting. If we could just go through that, please. If there's, on page 1, if there's anything there that anyone wishes to raise. No. Page 2.
Yeah, yes, please. There was the point about clarification being sought around the SRS Business Solutions entities that are external to the council. It was around whether or not those businesses were being run sort of for shareholders and private gain. Rob, if you remember. I just wondered if there's any follow-up on that.
Yeah. SRS has, if you like, a business arm to it. Okay. SRS is comprised of initially Monmouthshire, Torvine and the police. This business arm of SRS can't include the police, so it's just Monmouthshire and Torvine. So it's set up, if you like, as a commercial profit-making body, and it's there, albeit I don't think much has happened with that, if you like, section of SRS. And the far bigger purpose of SRS is to provide the IT systems, a public service for Monmouthshire, Torvine and the police. Now, interestingly, SRS has now been joined by Blaenau Gwent, so they've come on board as well. Newport they have, yeah, Andrew's nodding. Newport have come on board as well, and I think Caerphilly are also considering whether to join SRS. So, in my view, that would be a good thing, because, for example, if we can have this large SRS organisation, we could have our former Gwent councils, if I can call them that, operating on similar systems. So I think that would be a benefit. But that's the purpose of the SRS commercial trading wing. Albeit, as I say, I don't think it's done that much thus far.
I remember we were looking at that, came up specifically because we were talking about responsibilities of members when they go onto outside bodies, and all the other bodies that they would be involved with were sort of run for public sector purposes, and that one I just wanted to make sure I was clear whether or not it was being run for profit, and then what was happening to the profits, and just making sure that people are aware that if they're in a sort of more private sector type function, that it sort of just changes the nature of some of their duties a little bit.
Yes.
I just wanted to make sure I was clear on what happened really with the profits.
Yeah. On that element, I believe that the any profit that would be made would be ploughed back into SRS for the good of SRS and the IT systems of Monmouthshire and Torfaen. I think that's the intention. Okay.
Richard.
Yes, just quickly, can I raise an action from the minutes, which was to write to the adjudication panel for Wales, commenting on the fact that in their annual report they didn't name councillors, whereas they've all previously been named in all the individual decision reports. And I saw, Rob, you did write to them, and their reply back was quite sort of half-hearted, really. And I do think that they should be, very visible champions of openness and accountability, and we should write back and say we think that where councillors are named in individual decision reports, so the results of tribunals which are dripped out through the year, when those cases are summarised in the annual report, the councillor and the council should equally be named. It just seems that's what they should do as the highest ranking body in the whole standards regime.
I agree. It does seem rather odd, and it was a bit of a limp response, frankly, to the request. And it does seem rather strange in that the names of the individuals of the councils are on the website. If you look, they are there. So I don't quite understand this reluctance on their part. I don't quite understand that, but I can again take that forward by all means, Richard.
Jane.
Chair, I think that's a very good point. And I mean, if I remember correctly, was it just 4 cases that went to the highest level? Am I right in remembering that?
Yeah, that is correct. Yeah.
Okay, and hopefully there's nothing wrong with the third page. So we can everyone agree the minutes? And, yes, thank you. If we move on to item 6, then annual complaints report for 2016-17.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a report that comes to the Standards Committee on an annual basis, albeit we are very privileged today in that we have the Complaints Manager joining us, Annette Evans. So Annette, rather than me, will take you through the report and deal with any questions that you may have. Just one point to note, Chairman, today behind you is sat the Cabinet Member for Governance, Councillor Paul Jordan, actually a former member of the Standards Committee, who's come today, I think, in an observing capacity. Please, Annette, thank you.
I'm sorry this report is the 2016-17 report. I would like to have brought you the 2017-18 report, and I'm more than happy to do that at a later stage. Unfortunately, due to pressures, I haven't been able to do that. So I'll go through this one with you, and as I said, I'll come back with more up-to-date information. So this report provides you with some feedback on the complaints, compliments and comments that we receive in the Council for the whole authority. The whole authority complaints process is separate from the social services complaints process. And I deal with that one as well, but I've just focused here today on the whole authority complaints report. Some of you might know that there's 2 stages to the complaints process, the informal stage and the formal stage. We follow the Ombudsman's model that he's asked all 22 authorities to follow so that there's some consistency. And the first stage is where we try and resolve the complaints to the complainant's satisfaction without going through a formal stage. And most of the time that we do that, and presumably we do it to people's satisfaction, because we don't hear back from them. But that's not to say that they are satisfied, it's just that perhaps they don't want to go further. And then if they are not happy, they can take their complaint to the formal stage. And that's where we appoint an investigating officer, usually someone from out of the service area, to look at that complaint. And then they will have 20 working days to investigate the complaint, meet with the complainant and produce a report of their findings, and make recommendations and say whether the complaints have been upheld or not. So for this period, for 2016-17, there were 85 complaints made. And, you know, when you think of the whole council, 85 complaints is not a huge amount, really. My counterparts in other authorities deal with much more complaints than what we deal with. That's not to say that all the complaints come to me, because, you know, in the hubs and places like that, they try and resolve people's problems there and then if they can, without resorting to coming to me. We also had 153 comments made, and we deal with comments in the same way as we deal with the complaints, in as much as we don't go through the formal process, but we do log the comments and we do get back to people with a response to whatever their inquiry was. We also log compliments, and as you can see, there were 168 compliments that were made. So that's where people have taken the time and trouble to contact us to say how grateful they are for the service that they've received. Registrars and building control, they actually send out questionnaires, so the compliments for those services are higher than the other services. There were 6 complaints that proceeded straight to stage 2, because people do have the option of going straight to stage 2 rather than trying to deal with their complaint at stage 1. We try and ask people, you know, to go through that stage 1 process, but ultimately, if they don't want to, they can take their complaint to the formal level. The formal complaints concerned operations, planning, elections, highways, estates, and there was a professional strategy meeting as well. If people are not happy after the second formal stage, they can take their complaint to the Ombudsman. And the Ombudsman had five complainants that went there, but they didn't carry out any further investigation. The services that we get the most complaints about are recycling and waste, highways, passenger transport, development control, estates, leisure. They were the top ones for this particular year in question. And the sorts of things that we get complained about with regard to waste is non-collection, failure to provide food bins, garden waste, the cost of the bags. Sometimes there's communication issues. With highways, it depends on, it's seasonal. So in the winter, it's potholes. In the summer, this time of year now, it's hedges and the grass cutting. Passenger transport, they feature in our complaints. People complain perhaps about unreliable school transport, the bus timetables, sometimes poor driving. Planning, we get complaints about perhaps people don't feel that they've been consulted appropriately or enough. The handling of applications or issues with enforcement. Estates, usually there's issues about development of land, communication issues. Leisure, it's sometimes about incorrect swimming times, waiting for gym equipment, communication issues. Communication usually is across the board that we get complaints about. So that's the sort of complaints that we got for this particular period. With regard to the comments, they were about council tax, people perhaps feeling that mistakes have been made, or they can't get through to the council tax department, all sorts of things. Planning, the website, parking, these were all the sort of comments that we received. Operations, people complained about block gullies, street lighting features quite a bit these days. And again, roads and potholes in disrepair. And as I said, with regards to compliments, lovely to receive such compliments. The fact that people will actually take the effort to contact us is very pleasing. With regards to complaints, our timescales are that stage 1, we try and resolve complaints within 10 working days. So we try and get in there and sort it out as soon as possible. If that's not possible and people go to stage 2, we've got 20 working days for the investigation, and then the report goes to the relevant head of service. So if it was a complaint about planning, it would go to the head of planning for Mark Hand to respond to the complainant, saying if the complaints have been upheld or if there's been any recommendations made, what he is going to do to address those recommendations. And that's the same for each service that's being complained about. I think I've covered most of the issues there. I can tell you that I had a quick look at the figures for 2017-18, and we had 87 complaints. So there's 2 complaints more than for this period. But we had 13 formal complaints, so we had more formal complaints than 16-17. I think I've gone through things there with regards to complaints and comments and compliments. So I've also put much more information in the report about the sorts of issues that we get. We also get requests for service where people, they say they want to make a complaint, but it's actually a request for service because they haven't gone through the proper channel. But we still follow up on those requests for service as well. As a result of stage 2 investigations, we always draw up an action plan, and then I follow through with the appropriate sections to ensure that those recommendations that were made in the reports, something has been done about them, because at the end of the day, complaints is all about learning the lessons and trying to make sure that those sort of things don't happen again if possible. So we do follow through on those matters. So that's the complaints. I don't know whether anyone has any questions about it.
Just say thank you very much, Annette. Very comprehensive run through the procedures there. Just one query from me, really, to start off. When you log on to the Monmouth County Council website and you want to report something, does a report become a complaint, or it's logged as a report?
Yeah, it's logged as a report. It's not logged as a complaint. No. There is specifically something there that says that if you want to make a complaint, and it takes you to the complaints page.
Okay, thank you for that. Other questions, Joe?
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much, Annette. That was, very well put together, and it's very easy to understand. Can you tell me a little bit about your department? Do you work alone to deal with all these complaints? And you said you do social services as well. Do you think moving forward that, are you expecting complaints to increase? I mean, I'm thinking about really what's been happening with, we've got the rollout of universal credit, for example. What do you think the pressures are going to be on you? I mean, you do a fantastic job, obviously, on your own, but are you concerned about the future and perhaps, you know, the fact that we're under pressure and you've got adequate, you know, support to carry out your job?
Yes, well, it's only me and a part-time admin person that deals with the complaints, all the complaints in the council, social services complaints as well. I also line manage the data protection and freedom of information officer, and that person has been off on long-term sick for a year and has now finished with the authority. So it's been a very challenging year for me, I have to say, because as you know, the General Data Protection Regulations has come into force, and we've been working. I have got someone, Rachel, that has been helping me prepare for the General Data Protection Regulations. So it's been really busy, and that's the reason that I haven't been able to get this 2017-18 report ready for you today, because of all the other pressures. So yes, we'll have to see what happens, and it's been very, very busy. And I think with, you know, diminishing budgets and the resources, we are bound to get more complaints because people are not happy and they will complain. And also, people know their rights. More people know their rights these days than, you know, and they are ready to complain. You know, they say to me, I pay my council tax. Do you know how much council tax I pay? You know, and therefore I deserve and expect a service, and a better service than what I'm getting, whatever their issues are. So yeah, it's very challenging. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just come back and ask, the data protection employee, are they being replaced, or is that role gone?
They will be replaced, yes. They will be replaced, yeah.
Thank you. Can you confirm, if someone wants to make a complaint, do they have to put it in writing? And does it always have to be signed? And representing community councils, when you get a complaint, do you feed the information to the community councils? Thank you.
Well, they don't have to put it in writing. People can, they can give us their complaint verbally. So they can ring and talk to me on the telephone, or you know, they can go into one of our offices, our hubs, and make a complaint there. So it hasn't got to be in writing, because a lot of people might struggle with that. So no, we accept complaints in any form, to be honest. If it's a complaint regarding the community councils, or if they've been involved, well, then I would go back to them, but I wouldn't ordinarily report back to the community councils about complaints.
Hi, I'm Richard McGonigal, independent member. I'm just interested to understand, and it might sound like a bit of a dumb question, but I wanted to just understand how the work that Annette's team does with complaints kind of overlaps into the work of what the councillors do. Whether or not do you have to interact with the councillors? Do they have to get involved in responding to complaints and investigating? Just because we're here as a body to help scrutinise what the elected members do. So I'm just interested to see kind of how the work that you do feeds into that sort of public life.
Well, you might get complaints from your constituents, and then you might contact me to say that Mr. Jones has asked me to represent him in raising this complaint and dealing with that complaint. I would need to have some sort of evidence, permission sort of thing, that you know, that I could provide you with that information. It depends what you know, what the issues are about. But yes, you know, you can act on behalf of your constituents, and you can come to me if they have an issue. I don't generally tell councillors, you know, what's going on a day-to-day, weekly basis about complaints, because I bring the reports to this committee, to audit committee. I go to, with social services reports, I go to children's and adults select committees. So therefore they have an idea of the sort of numbers and types of complaints and the issues that we're dealing with. Because we have to be mindful of confidentiality as well.
Sorry, Jim, if I could assist with that. I think the role of members with complaints, the nature of complaints that Annette deals with, the member is if you like a conduit for the complainant, where the member is actually being complained about. And more specifically, there is an allegation that the member's code of conduct has been breached. That is more, if you like, the domain of the monitoring officer, and more particularly the domain of the Public Services Ombudsman for Wales. So when you look on the Ombudsman for Wales website, which is, as I say, is very, very useful in fairness, there are two strands of complaints. There are the maladministration complaints, the complaints of maladministration, which are akin to what Annette deals with, you know, complaints about the service provision by the council, and there are the code complaints, which is more sort of our territory here, where members are alleged to have breached the code of conduct.
So therefore this service that Annette is looking after is about if you've got a member of the public, they might complain to their councillor about something, and the councillor will sort of then go, Annette, can you help me? So there's this kind of, it's part of the service provision for meeting the needs of the people. Yeah.
I think the test is in the circumstances you describe, the complainant isn't complaining about the member as such. It is about the service that the council is providing, isn't it? I think that's the way to look at it.
Chair, can I just say on that particular point, I mean, as a councillor, obviously we deal with our casework on a daily basis, and you know, a lot of things that may have turned into complaints otherwise will be prevented from doing so because we interact with the officers. I mean, I've come in today and I've gone down to see officers in housing because I'm dealing with something to do with housing. But I have to say there are some things that we get asked about which, you know, we try and fight the corner for the resident, but there's some things that are impossible. Just one example, I've got a situation in my ward where somebody thinks their road should be gritted. Now, this road is a tiny little lane. It will never be on the regular gritting route. And although I've had all the meetings with highways and I've met with the resident, they still won't accept that it's not on the gritting route. And they may turn that into a formal complaint, but one would hope that having interacted with them and demonstrated to them that we've really tried to do this, but there's some things we just can't do because we have to keep the main routes gritted, but we can't, you know, also grit all these little roads. So I think that, I mean, Annette, it's lovely to see you today and to hear the brilliant work that you're doing in your department, and I think it's really a reflection on the excellent job you're doing that I really don't hear about these complaints, which I think shows that, you know, they're being handled so well. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, thanks. Thanks very much for the report. And my first impression is it's great to see those graphs going in the right direction, isn't it? And I absolutely agree that to have only 85 complaints, given the breadth of service provision, plus the constraints of austerity, is amazing. And also to have such a low total going through to formal investigation. And I think I looked at your descriptions on pages 3 and 4, and only one of those was wholly upheld and 4 partially upheld, which is really almost nothing level. But probably for us, the best independent measure of is the procedure and the whole complaints regime working is what you've got on the first page, where the Public Services Ombudsman, not only did they not uphold any complaints against Monmouthshire, they actually didn't see that there were any worthy of investigation, which is a really good result. And I think that's the top measure for us, given that we are meant to look at the effectiveness of the procedure, and that's where the warning lights might go on, or if all of a sudden they started investigating or they upheld things. So I think it's really good. And I just had one question on compliments. Do they all get back to the individual members of staff or teams through the system?
Yes, generally the teams contact me and tell me they've had a compliment. If they come direct, if the compliments come into me, I will make sure the teams are informed, but it's usually the other way around.
Okay, are there any further, Richard?
Sorry, and this is a question about, I thought I'll go onto the MCC website and go into compliments and complaints, and I went down through into how do you do it. And there are two documents. There's one called Whole Authority Complaints and Compliments Policy, and there's another one called Whole Authority Complaints and Compliments Procedure, whereas there's only one for the social services side. And I wondered whether at the next revision, could they be combined? Would it make sense to have them as a single thing, so you've got one document for social services and one document for whole authority, from the public point of view?
It's difficult really, because the social services one is we have to follow the legislation and the regulation on it. We've tried to, with the Ombudsman's model, to keep the timescales the same, because for the social services, stage 1 is 10 working days and stage 2 is 25 working days. It could well be something that we could have a look at. Yeah.
Thank you, Richard. A further question?
Yeah, I'm sorry, this is a question for Rob actually. So we have down in the Constitution that we must ensure the Council's complaints procedures operate effectively, and Annette's explained we've got two. We've got this one, the whole authority procedure on the model Welsh Government process, and social services. Does that mean we're also responsible for looking at the social services procedure, and therefore we should have a session on that perhaps in September at our next meeting, when we might also be able to do your new data for 2017-18 for the whole authority at the same time?
I think historically we've covered off the social services complaints within this report. Annette has explained that the social services complaint system is rather different, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Annette, but where we have a complaint about social services provision, it must be investigated by someone independent of the authority. So not independent of the social services department, but independent of MCC as a whole. And it is it's a real hit on resources, frankly, isn't it? My understanding, because these complaints need to be thoroughly investigated by the nature of them. But back to your question, Richard, we tend to cover off the, if you like, the two procedures within this one report. We don't, or haven't in the past, looked at social services complaints specifically. One of the reasons for that may be their nature, and the council needs to be careful keeping details confidential. So, for example, people's names, etc. So we haven't done that in the past. Is that reported to a select committee at all?
Yeah, I'm going to say I report to the Adults and the Children's Select Committee. So the report I take there, I could bring here as well. And then that would give you an idea of the sorts of complaints we get for social services. And as Rob said, when with social services complaints, the formal investigation, we have to have independent external investigators, and there is a cost to that.
Thank you for that, Annette. Richard, just a quick query on that. You raised the social services side of things by referring to one of the principal responsibilities. Which one was it that you identified?
So I was looking at the section of the Constitution that covers our responsibility, and it's it's subparagraph L, and it says ensuring the council's complaints procedures operate effectively. And then when I was reading through Annette's report, she made it clear this is about whole authority complaints, but then there is a separate statutory process to do with social services complaints. So my question for Rob was, does that bit of the Constitution mean that we are responsible for assessing or monitoring the effectiveness of the social services procedure, or does that actually live somewhere else? So it was either, if it lives somewhere else, perhaps the Constitution could be clarified. If it's part of our responsibility, then it would be interesting for us perhaps to see it in September. I appreciate the confidentiality, and we're not going to go into detail, but just that thing on response times, you know, the different appeal processes, what the outcomes were, how far people took things through the system. It's just something like that, really.
Well, in the past we've dealt with it sort of in this one report, but as Annette says, if there is a report available, and in fact I would suggest that the select committee looking at social services would be the more appropriate venue, if you like, but there is certainly no harm in this standards committee looking at that process. And indeed, if there is a report available by Annette, then that seems to be that would seem to be possible.
Yes, thanks for that. Just really sort of labouring the point a little bit. The in our principal responsibilities, item I is receiving and investigating reports and complaints relating to the members' code of conduct and protocols approved by the council from time to time. Are we in danger of straying away from?
Well, we need to be careful because that clearly is our main remit. Okay, we are looking after the conduct of members, the way they behave. That's our principal objective, and undoubtedly. But this committee has always looked at the complaints processes of the council, and again, I think that's right. And I don't think it would dilute the committee, frankly, Chairman. But I'll be steered by you and fellow committee members on this. But I think that as the report is available on social services complaints, then it wouldn't, it's not asking Annette to do even more work because that report's already here. And if members wish to have a look at it, then they could, I would suggest.
Yeah, okay. Thanks for that, Rob. Yes, we'll go with it and see what comes out of that then. So, are there any further questions for Annette? No? Thank you very much. Oh, Richard, got it.
I'm sorry, are we going to do just briefly on FOI and EIR? I just had and you answered it on email. I had a question on that because we've got there the timescale response, which is responding in the 20 working days, and that's a statutory requirement, and that's easy to measure. But then you also provided me with measures of the quality of the response, because anyone who puts in a request can request an internal review, and then you have to go through a process, and then they can go, and only then can they go to the commissioner. And Annette sent me data and said that there were only 10 requests for internal review, and only one of those was partially upheld. So that's a very good result. And as you said, Annette, in your email, you're not aware of anything references from the Information Commissioner. And I just did a quick search, and I found the last decision notice issued by the Information Commissioner about Monmouthshire is back in 2014, which again is a good measure that the procedure is working, and it's actually about the quality of the response, not just the timing. So I think that's very good.
Right. Any further questions for Annette? Pretty strict. Okay, I'd just like to say thank you very much on behalf of the committee for attending today and giving a very comprehensive report, and also answering the questions that came to you. So thank you very much. we move on to the next item then, item 7, annual government statement. Rob?
Okay, Chairman, thank you for that. The next report that we'll consider is the annual governance statement for 2017-18. To my left here is Andrew Wathen. Andrew is our Chief Internal Auditor. And interestingly, he is also the Chief Internal Auditor of Newport. So the audit function is shared and has been for some time between Newport and Monmouthshire. So welcome aboard for Andrew here. This governance statement is a draft statement, so that's important. It's not in its final form yet. And it goes to the audit committee to be approved. This is new in that we don't normally have the governance statement before the standards committee, Chairman. But I don't think that that causes any problems. In that, although primarily it is part of the audit function, I would suggest it would be useful, particularly as this is in draft form, for members to see it and indeed to make any comments on it. And I'm sure that Andrew would find that helpful if there were any comments. So over to Andrew, please, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Chairman. Morning, members. Thank you for inviting me along this morning to your Standards Committee. Much appreciated. I've given you an overview of the annual governance statement to start with, and then the detailed actual statement which feeds into the accounts. In terms of the draft version, as Rob mentioned, it is important to make that point. It's draft because it's draft up until it's signed off by the statement of accounts, which will be in September. So if there are any governance issues which come up between now and then, they can feed into the statement. So it's for me to be aware of those and for other officers around the authority to feed into me. My role is to collate the information, is to pull the statement together based on the policies and procedures that the authority operates. And I get fed in information from a number of officers who've got other responsibilities around the organisation, such as Annette. Her complaints and compliments figures and statistics feed into my statement, as do the FOI requests. And you'll notice that some of the tables are not updated, and that's for the reasons why Annette's already mentioned this today. The annual governance statement is quite lengthy, but hopefully by the end of the discussion this morning, you'll find that it's comprehensive and you'll agree that it's the right version. It's a requirement of the Accounts and Audit Regulations 14 to have an annual governance statement accompanying the statement of accounts, which is the financial statements of the authority. So this talks about what policies and procedures we have in place, how effective they are, how do we review them, how often do we review them, and any concerns we have or any gaps we have in terms of our governance arrangements. So it's built on a framework devised by the Delivering Good Governance Local Government 2016, which has been developed by SIPFA and Solace, which are two key organisations within the UK local government. It talks about how Monmouthshire is compliant with that, and demonstrates that we use public money in an effective, economic and an efficient way. And part of my function is to test that out, test out that the systems are working appropriately. My team, which is the internal audit team, and there are 6 of us, me being a part-timer as Rob mentioned, because I wear 2 hard hats most of the time, undertake the internal control element of the governance arrangements, which then feed into the annual governance statement. So my team look at how well internal controls are operating within the organisation across all services, and we report separately into audit committee. And there's a section on internal audit within the statement. But the statement itself is based on 7 key principles. There are 2 overarching principles which are laid out before you. in that the organisation needs to ensure that it behaves with integrity, demonstrating strong commitment to ethical values and respecting the law. So some of what Rob does feed into the statement as well. In terms of the Constitution, which has been mentioned already this morning, if that's updated and it is modernised, then that also helps in terms of strengthening the governance arrangements within the organisation. The other overarching requirement is ensuring openness and comprehensive stakeholder engagement. And hopefully you'll see by the detail of what's in the statement is that Monmouthshire does do that, and on a regular basis. So in terms of achieving good governance overall and ensuring that effective arrangements are in place, what I've tried to do is to demonstrate what processes we have in place and then what examples we have had in 1718 to prove that or disprove it, to substantiate or refute those particular arrangements. And those are and the specific principal headlines. So they are defining outcomes in terms of sustainable economic, social, environment and cultural benefits, determining the interventions necessary to optimise the achievement of the intended outcomes, developing the entity's capacity, including the capability of its leadership and the individuals within it, managing risks and performance through robust internal control and strong public management. And that's where my team comes into play. And finally, implementing good practices in terms of transparency, reporting and audit to deliver effective accountability. So I report independently in my own name to the audit committee, even though I report to the head of finance as my line manager. I can be critical of the head of finance if I feel in the work that I've undertaken, in terms of the systems we undertake, financial systems that we review as part of the audit process are not as good as I would hope them to be. I can be critical of my manager, which is an interesting position to be in sometimes when we come to audit committee, but it can be done and it has been done. So in terms of the detail of the statement, it is quite lengthy, Chairman, so I don't propose to go through in a lot of detail, but there's an overview in terms of the summary. What have we done well in the year? What do we need to do better to improve our governance arrangements? And there's an action plan at the end to say what we're actually going to do and what we've achieved based on the statement from the previous year. And in between that, the statement sets out how we've complied with the 7 principles, how we comply with future generations, the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, and there's diagrams to prove that we're working in that regime. It takes on board the corporate plan, the improvement plan, how well we're dealing with the public. It also picks up the element of how effective we are. What have we done in the year to demonstrate that we are good in terms of governance? Or are there any gaps which we need to fill, and how are we going to fill them? So, and there are a number of things that give that as an example, and that's on paragraph 18. I have a responsibility within that. Rob's got a responsibility in that the Constitution is updated. And we've also got cabinet members, and members have a responsibility for ensuring that the meetings that they operate are done in the appropriate way as well. So moving on to the actual principles, Principle A, we have got various codes of conduct in place. We have a standards committee, obviously, so you feed into the governance statement as a separate body. We have various arrangements in place to ensure we've got child protection and protection of vulnerable adults. Policies and procedures in place to comply with our statutory responsibilities. In terms of the audit side of things, we ensure that the contract procedure rules are complied with, so the way in which we procure and spend the public money is done appropriately and above board, and there's an element of transparency. We have financial procedure rules within the organisation, so any financial management must comply with those rules, and my team check against that and report accordingly. And as you'll see, overall for 17-18, we as an internal audit team issued 37 audit opinions, ranging from, and based on the level of assurance we got from the internal control environment. There were 8 jobs which had limited assurance, which meant that there were gaps that needed to be filled. But overall, the opinion that I have to give in my annual report, again reporting into Audit Committee, was that it was a reasonable level of assurance. So managers agree to implement any actions to address any gaps, and that's part of our audit process. To ensure that they do that, and again to demonstrate good governance, we will follow up that particular process to ensure that the recommendations have been implemented. And where we've got limited assurance, then we will go in and we will do a second audit of that in a bit more detail to demonstrate that the managers have actually implemented improvements to particular systems or service delivery. We also need to, as an internal audit team, need to comply with our professional standards, which are the public sector internal audit standards, and we have to be externally validated, again demonstrating good governance. It's reassuring to note to members that we are compliant with those standards. In terms of ensuring openness and comprehensive stakeholder engagement, there are a range of activities which the organisation undertakes and are involved with to demonstrate that particular principle. You've all referred to the website this morning, and we try and be as open and transparent as we possibly can, and there are a number of links within our website which hopefully will demonstrate our openness. Most of the cabinet member meetings, council, audit committee and scrutiny select are open meetings, are live streamed. That demonstrates an openness. Let's try to pick up some highlights. In terms of non-compliance with our contract procedure rules, I will report into Audit Committee on a 6-monthly basis, and where appropriate, call in managers and heads of service if there's been non-compliance or if there's patterns of non-compliance, just to make sure that we've got sound financial management across the board. Picking up customer complaints are something which Annette deals with. We make sure we're on top of that as well. In terms of developing the entity's capacity, including the capability of leadership, that's about training, responsibility, developing our members and our officers to the best of they can possibly be, and providing them with a range of support to do that. Members have a programme of training coming on board since elections 2017. Some are new members, some are revisited members, and we've got a process of continual training. Officers have CPD in some areas, and that demonstrates again good governance. We also have our appraisal process, which is the check-in, check-out, which is managed by HR, and they provide stats on that in terms of its usefulness, but that demonstrates we've got a commitment to our staff to develop them to the best of their abilities. We work in partnership as an organisation, and we've got an agreed WASPI, which is the Wales Accord for sharing personal information, making sure that we are compliant when we do work in partnership to develop various services. And there are a range of partners which we work with across the board in all sorts of service areas. Again, to demonstrate good governance, we need to make sure that those partnerships have good governance arrangements in them at the outset. When we come to managing the risks of the organisation, again, that's reported into Cabinet on a regular basis, and within this statement we demonstrate that we've looked at the key risks, the key strategic risks of the organisation, pre-mitigation and post-mitigation, and those are outlined in the report. The report goes on to talk about other partnerships. Then information governance is quite key and demonstrates we've got appropriate processes in place to deal with information governance correctly, and we are on top of it. So that about sums it up, Chairman, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Richard.
Yes, thanks very much, Andrew. And I think it's a very broad scope document, but the real fit with what we do is Principle A, which is, the SIPFA Solace principle, which says behaving with integrity, demonstrating strong commitment to ethical values and respecting the rule of law. And that's really the core of our responsibilities as a committee in the Constitution. And I note that the governance statement has got to show evidence to provide assurance that the governance system works. So you can't just describe what's there, can you? Which is tempting, because there's a lot of things there, but you've got to put things, examples in, or core bits of evidence, and like you did in the first section with the internal audit opinions and the ratings for the last 3 years. And so in terms of our responsibility, which is really in 20 and 21, where it talks about, 20 talks about there is a code of conduct, exactly, but the guidance, the SIPFA guidance also said it's not enough to have a code, you've got to, are you communicating that effectively? Perhaps we could add just a simple point or a sentence on paragraph 20 about training, because I know training was offered to all councillors immediately after the May 2017 elections, and had very good coverage, and we've already got the stats for that, which we got from John Pearson, I think, in November, and I think 14 out of 16 of the new councillors were all trained almost immediately that they joined. So that would be a good thing to add there. And then in the same way as you've got, Andrew, your internal audit opinions, I felt perhaps around paragraph 20 or 21, if we've got the data, I'm sure we could get it, we could put in the data from the Public Services Ombudsman for 2017-18, and perhaps for the last 2 or 3 years, where every year the Ombudsman's annual report puts a table out for all the county borough councils, where he says this is the number of complaints against Monmouthshire councils that I dealt with, and he puts them into categories. And I know for the last few years, in general, we've had low or no referrals back to us as a committee, and low or no referrals upwards to the adjudication panel. So I just thought that's, in terms of evidence and independent and objective, that says, because we can always say we've got a code, but if we're not training people, and if we're getting complaints in and they're going upstairs into the Ombudsman, up into the panel, then we're failing as a committee. And those were two bits of evidence. And just a question for Rob. I know the annual report for the Ombudsman doesn't come out till August, but whether we could ask them, that table at the back, I think it's Appendix B or something, he might already have the data for 17-18, that we could get that in terms of your deadline for September, and put actually the line in for 2017-18 data and show it going back 3 years, just like your table for internal audit opinions.
Yes, Chairman, I'm sure that can be done. In fairness to the Ombudsman, when he releases his annual report, he releases a draft to the monitoring officers throughout Wales, just to confirm that the figures that he's going to present tally up with the figures that we've got. So I'm sure that would be possible. I do know because we had our quarterly monitoring officers meeting in Wales for the Welsh monitoring officers in Llandudno and Wells last Friday. A representative of the Ombudsman was there, and she confirmed that, again, the complaints are going the right way of alleged breaches of the code, i.e. they are going down, and that now has been the case for, gosh, I think going as far back now as 2012. So it is going in the right direction, certainly.
Chairman, thanks. And just to add to that, I'm more than happy to add that onto the statement.
Are there any further questions for Andy?
Can I just add a comment, Irene Cameron, how encouraging it has been to have face to these reports and to have the opportunity to put questions. It really has been to our advantage, and thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for that, Irene. Any further questions? Richard?
I'm just interested to understand what the independent audit arrangements are. I think you mentioned that you report to the head of finance and that you're empowered to raise comments or observations or criticisms of that role. What, is there an external independent audit that takes place as well?
Yes, yeah. The external auditors are our Wales Audit Office at the moment. They primarily deal with the accounts. So the statement that this feeds into, the statement of accounts, which is an annual requirement, legal requirement, they review that to make sure that there's a true and fair representation of our financial expenditure throughout the year. They don't audit us, they audit this statement of accounts. In terms of my responsibility, that is to look at the internal control environment, the governance arrangements and the risk management processes of the organisation on an internal basis, not an external basis. So both internal audit and external audit report into audit committee. So there's an accountability aspect there. The chair of the audit committee is an independent member, and other members of the council sit on the audit committee, and they hold me to account for ensuring that there's appropriate assurance across the board, across the service areas. Likewise, they hold the external auditors to account for their work as well. Part of the external audit work as well is performance management. So they might do pick up value for money exercises across the board, but our roles are different. They come from an external perspective in terms of the statement of accounts, and my role is more internal control arrangements.
Thank you. No further questions? Well, thank you, Andrew, for, again, another comprehensive report for us today. And thank you for taking questions as well. So, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Andrew. Okay, we'll move on to item number 8, which is any other business. Rob.
Shall I pick up that, Chairman, please? A couple of points, Chairman. The first thing is the Standards Conference, the All Wales Standards Conference. I think I've mentioned this before. It's taking place at Aberystwyth University on the 14th of September. As and when I know further details, i.e. when agenda come out, etc., I'll make sure that committee members see that. For members who haven't been to the Standards Conference, I suggest it would be very, very worthwhile you attending. So I know it's a bit of a trek to Aberystwyth, but very worthwhile in my opinion. A couple of points: you will meet your contemporaries from other councils throughout Wales. It's a good opportunity to meet them. It's a good opportunity to discuss problems because we have similar issues, I suggest. So well worthwhile on the 14th of September. The second point under any other business, Chairman, is that there's an adjudication panel hearing on the 19th of July. That is going to take place at Cwmbran Magistrates Court. Again, that is a public hearing, so that if any members wanted to attend that hearing, they could do so. That hearing is in respect of a former councillor of this authority, Councillor Graham Down. He is currently a member of a community council within the area, within the county rather. So that's an adjudication panel hearing at Cwmbran Magistrates Court on the 19th of July. I will be attending that, Chairman. I have to attend that. The President has written to me and asked me to attend, and has asked me a series of questions about Councillor Down's former conduct, etc. So I will be there to attend that. If any member wants to attend, they are more than able to come, and if they want to know where Cwmbran Magistrates Court is, for example, I can certainly give them details, so please get in touch with me.
Jane.
Chairman, on that point, would we just pitch up on the day and sit in the public gallery, or do we have to notify anyone we're going?
I think it's the former. You can certainly pitch up on the day, but if you let me know, yeah, I'm definitely going to attend, Rob. I'll let the clerk to the panel know, just out of courtesy, really. So I can certainly I'll certainly do that. It commences, Chairman, at 10 o'clock.
Right.
And it'll be for a day. It would be interesting, members, from the point of view that you will hear a representative of the Ombudsman, if you like, making the case. Then the councillor, I don't know whether the councillor is legally represented, but he certainly can be, and it's quite a formal procedure, frankly, before the adjudication panel. So, as I say, Cwmbran Magistrates Court, 19th of July.
Rob, is it? I don't know the facts about former councillor Down. I don't know if it's appropriate to go into any detail. I'm just interested to know what relevance it has to the committee generally in terms of past behaviour or so on.
Certainly. It probably wouldn't be appropriate, Chairman, if I go into the facts, bearing in mind there is going to be a hearing on the 19th of July. The relevance to this committee is that, of course, the Adjudication Panel for Wales is the highest tier of tribunal to consider alleged breaches of the Code of Conduct. So it is entirely relevant to the work of this Standards Committee. It is quite interesting that whilst we've had no references from the Ombudsman since, I think, 2013, or it may have been early 14, this will now be the second reference to the Adjudication Panel for Wales, in that a community councillor from Mega, an Andy Community Council, went before the Adjudication Panel in I think that was 2015 or 2016. Yeah, 2016. Thank you, Councillor Evans. Yeah, quite interesting from that point of view, that the Ombudsman has obviously decided these are serious matters, and therefore made a reference to the Adjudication Panel for Wales. So that's the relevance, Richard, of the work that we do. Entirely relevant in my view.
I won't be able to attend, unfortunately, in July, but is it the sort of thing that at our next quarterly meeting you'd be able to give us more information about once it's sort of been and gone, yeah?
Yeah, I can certainly do that, in that we'll have a decision by then. And if you recall, the Mega and Andy Community Councillor, I did bring a sort of report to the Standards Committee, and I thought that was quite helpful in that we went through the allegation, and then we went through, what the adjudication panel thought about it. And on that occasion, the member was suspended for 2 or 3 months, I think. Yeah. So yeah, we can certainly do that. Some other points of any other business, Chairman, if I may.
Yeah, sorry, just talking about the tribunal with Councillor Graham Down. I know you can't go into detail, but and there's hardly anything available, again, on the APW website. It just says a breach of 4B, which is the respect and courtesy thing. Am I correct in thinking this relates to comments made by Councillor Down at full council in July 2016? Are you able even to say that?
Yeah, as I say, I don't think it would be appropriate for me to go into any detail here, but I can confirm that it isn't about those comments. It's not about those comments. Those comments that Councillor Down made at council, the Ombudsman didn't consider that to be a breach of the code, in that obviously members have a right to free speech and a right to express opinions. So whilst a complaint was made by the leaders, by the 3 leaders of the groups here, the Ombudsman didn't consider that there was a breach, and we've had a response on that. So it's not regarding that matter. a couple of other... sorry, Chairman.
I'm going to say, is it live streamed or is it?
No, it isn't. It isn't live streamed. Although a copy of the decision will be available on the Adjudication Panel for Wales website when that decision's made. But not live streamed, Chairman, out of interest at the moment. The next point, please, under any of the business members, is that one of our independent members, Mr. Mark Sutton, has decided, sadly, to stand down from the committee, from the Standards Committee. He gave his resignation to me, and I have let your chair and vice chairman know about this. So as of the 30th of May, Mark has stood down through pressure of work. Rather a shame in that Mark's been a long-standing member here. He came on board in 2014. So that's a shame. So we will need to now advertise for a new independent member, and that's a rather lengthy process that we'll go through. But we will, because I can say that with confidence. In the past, we've been very lucky in that we've had lots and lots of good, very, very good applicants, actually. When the two Richards came on the beginning of last year, we had, well over 10 applicants, I believe. Yeah, possibly even going to 20. So yeah, we are blessed in that respect. So I have no doubt, Chairman, that we will get another good candidate on board. And it may be, Chairman, this will be a matter for the council, but it may be worthwhile in the report to council suggesting that we fill the independent slot, that we also make reference to the fact that a very long-standing member, Graham Priest, will be standing down next year. So Graham's 10 years will be up. Gosh, that's gone very, very quickly, to say the least. Graham, wasn't it? So Graham will have to stand down. I think it's either June or September. It's June, is it? So June next year. So it could well be worth us advertising for two positions, and then when Graham stands down a year hence, we'll have someone available to take over.
Can I give it, Rob?
Certainly.
Actually, my health is not getting any better. I'm having difficulty walking. I say I'm on 2 sticks now. My wife is also ill. I say perhaps it'd be easier for you to have advertised it 2 hours from, and then make this my last meeting. It's just because of the. I say I couldn't get out. I was ill in September, last year in there, and I couldn't get out with the snow. I couldn't clear my driveway, and I got to get out to come down. So I'm sort of heavily reliant on outside help to. If adverse conditions to get down to anywhere, but I say I've got a hand control car, but that was one of the reasons trying a hand control car in snow and ice, don't bother. So I say perhaps I say off my resignation here and now, that would clarify matters, save the council the expense of going into having to do something again the beginning of next year.
What I was intending, Graham, was to suggest to the council that this is entirely a matter for you, of course, but I was going to suggest that your term of office will come to an end next year, and that if we have another candidate, that candidate could take over a year hence from now. So you stay on board, but it's entirely a matter for you, Graham.
My wife has got a heart problem.
It's entirely up to you, Graham. It's you know, it's difficult for me to say, yeah, that's fine, Graham. Personally, I would like you to stay on for another year, but it's entirely up to you. Your end of office is sort of June 2019, so it's entirely up to you.
No, I say perhaps we leave it as it is. I say
Okay.
make today the last one, and that's it.
Okay, that's okay. Thank you.
If you accept it, will you be prepared to accept it?
Yeah.
Do you look for email?
If you could, just for record purposes, Graham, that would be that would be great. So, Chairman, hot off the press, there we will be advertising for 2 independent members of our standards committee, but we'll put that in place.
Okay, Rob, thank you. And on behalf of the committee then, Graham, thank you for your long service and for your invaluable contributions to these committee meetings.
Indeed.
Chair, I don't know what the protocol is, but would it be relevant that we as a council formally write and thank these members for their long service and their outstanding service to the committee?
That can certainly be done. I on your behalf, I have already emailed Mark Sutton, thanking him for his time on the committee. So I've done that, and certainly I can do on your behalf a similar thing for Graham. The next point, Chairman, that I need to raise with you, and gosh, this is a time of change on the Standards Committee. I think you may all be aware of this now, but I am actually leaving Monmouthshire as well. And this will be, sadly, my last meeting of the Standards Committee of Monmouthshire County Council. So that's, as I say, there is more than an element of sadness for me there. I'm going to Pastures New. I go to Caerphilly County Borough Council on, I think my first day is August the 13th. So this will be my last Standards Committee meeting. The council is, as we speak, going through a process of appointing my successor, and we should know the identity of my successor. I think there's a council meeting on the 6th of August. Sorry, I do apologise, Nicola. The 6th of July to make that appointment. Yeah, as I say, my last meeting, unfortunately. And one final point, Chairman, is that I am carrying out some training tonight at Gilwyn Community Hall for town and community councillors. It was initially requested by Llanelli Community Council, but I've suggested to the clerks in the area that, look, if there are members interested, please come along. So I think we've got 20 coming along tonight, which is great. So that'll be the 4th session I've done now with town and community councillors since the elections. So that'll be interesting tonight. Always sort of thought-provoking stuff, and it's interesting what questions come my way at such events. And I think, Chairman, that's all from any other business from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. What in your role, you were Deputy Monitoring Officer for many years, attending these meetings. Whoever comes in, will they be new to things like Standards Committee?
I don't know the identity of the candidates, Chairman, so it'll be interesting it'll be interesting for me to know that. So I don't know that, but obviously one of the roles of the monitoring officer will be assisting the Standards Committee with the adherence by the members of the Code of Conduct. So my successor will certainly be attending this committee, and will, as I say, have to go through this process now of appointing 2 independent members, which is what we did the beginning of last year. So yes, so part of their remit will certainly be servicing this committee.
Okay, thank you for that, Rob. If I could just say then, again, on behalf of the committee, we'd like to thank Rob for his really really invaluable service to us. I don't think we could run these meetings without the way that you
Thank you.
prepared the papers for us and then gone through the trouble of explaining them in great detail.
Thank you, Jim.
So thank you for that, Rob. We can't really ask you to write a letter to yourself, so if we could just record in the minutes the committee's thanks to Rob for his service to us.
Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you. And on that life-changing point, if we could just say that the next meeting is scheduled for the 17th of September at 10 o'clock. So thank you everyone for attending. Thank you, Andrew, for coming along.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you everyone.
Thank you, Chair.